Hey everybody, welcome back. I am hiking through some of the 1,000 acres of the beautiful Sand Run Metropark in Summit County, Ohio. And I need a breather, and I'm shedding layers because, you know, a lot of it's uphill. And we have already talked about the two queens of the tarot that are the most conventional, the most stereotypical, the cups and the coins. And I'd like to take some time to talk about the two queens of tarot that are the most unconventional. Now, all the queens in tarot mirror the queens of history, as we've said before. And some queens find themselves under that crown too young. And some queens find themselves under that crown alone. And these are two examples that I believe are personified in the Queen of Wands and the Queen of Swords. So let's have a look at the cards. Okay, this is the Robin Wood Queen of Wands. Let's have a look at the card in detail. Okay, so the very first thing that you'll notice is this same yellow background, this flat yellow background. But in the Rider-Waite-Smith, like we said, that is going to deal with something of substantial emotion, and the Queen of Wands is that. Her crown is very much decorative. It's not meant to be regal. It's not meant to impress, but she is sun energy, and she is so in love with this idea of her sun energy that, I mean, it reflects in her crown, in her outward dress, as you can see, all hot colors for the most part. She has a very princessy vibe. I personally think she's got to be the youngest of the queens, like a child bride. You can see the long, impractical bell sleeves, that low square cut bodice, the long skirts. Everything about the way that she dresses and presents herself is very physically immature. It's very princessy. Her suit is grasped not, I don't believe that this is in a commanding or controlling way. Based on her body posture and the look on her face, the Queen of Wands is proud to identify with this and is holding it above herself. It is an ideal that she has romanticized, this wand energy. You can see the flowers in the background, the sunflowers, they turn their face to the sun. That is something that is so important about that flower. And she appears to do that. But as you can see, her skin, it's not sunburnt or tanned. She doesn't spend time out in her element, physically experiencing it, but she is in love with the idea of it, if that makes sense at all. And there's some sun symbols there on her body, on the skirt, excuse me, around the hem. And there is the black cat that follows her everywhere. What is the deal with the black cat? I believe that in the Robin Wood, that black cat is an awful lot like the fool's white dog. I mean, she's so young and inexperienced, and full of life and innocence that maybe some outward force needs to keep an eye on her. But that is the Queen of Wands in detail. Right, so the Queen of Wands is the very youngest. The Queen of Wands is vivacious, is full of life, is full of the energy of her suit. The Queen of Wands needs to enjoy herself, needs to enjoy her life, and that's a need with a capital N. The Queen of Wands needs to be the center of attention. And that sounds awfully harsh. And the Queen of Wands is not meant to be looked down upon, or not meant to be treated harshly by the interpreter, by the client. The Queen of Wands is there to talk about a phase in life that has nothing to do with choice and everything to do with experience. And so that should be taken into account, that the Queen of Wands is not something to chide and dismiss, but it is part of human development and is thus worthy of attention that is equal and worthy of respect that is equal. Now, if you were to reverse or invert the Queen of Wands, I believe that what you would get would be like the Queen of Coins. It doesn't change the core embodiment of the card, but it does change the attitude of the card. She's still young, she's still inexperienced, she's still innocent and searching, but the thing is, the way she approaches life is entirely different. The Queen of Wands in reverse, instead of being a tease, is demure. Instead of being vivacious, is shy. Instead of being the center of attention, is the person who shies away from it the most. The Queen of Wands in reverse, if you will, is sort of the queen were she an ordinary girl and not famous. There you have it. Okay, this is the Queen of Swords as interpreted by Robin Wood. Let's have a closer look at her as well. So the first and most important thing to point out for the Queen of Swords, at least how I interpret her, is the way that she holds her suit. That sword is upright in the same way as justice. I don't believe that she is given overtly to emotion or given to be unfair in her ruling as queen. The other important thing to note is that the Queen of Swords is the one holding the sword. Now, I know you're thinking this is a tarot card, she's the Queen of Swords, it's a sword, give it a rest, but bear with me. The sword is a male symbol of authority, right? The king wields the sword. If there is no king to wield the sword, her sons would wield swords. If there are no sons to wield swords, some extended family member would be the one wielding swords for her from a historical perspective. They are not holding the sword in this card. A trusted friend or advisor, say the castellan of a castle, would be the one wielding the sword, but that is not the case. The Queen of Swords is grasping the sword, and this is significant, as significant in tarot as it is from a historical perspective, I think. There is no man to wield that blade for her. She must do it herself. She must do it alone. Her crown is attached to her lifestyle. As you can see, as it's attached to her hair decoration, she is reserved. She is modest in the way that she presents herself. She is not interested in being attractive in that conventional outward, some would say, empty sense. The Queen of Swords clothing is very loose, very flowing, very voluminous. The Queen of Swords wears a formal gown. Of course, it shows off her status and rank. The symbols of the air are in it, and it is beautiful and probably expensive. It is also not form-fitting or revealing. She rules on her own right with the sword in hand, not as a woman in an audacious gown. There are the roses, you know, red rose is a symbol of love. The Queen of Swords is not lonely of her own accord and is not a cold person. There is stars and a dark night sky and a bright white clouds with birds and butterflies. The air, which is the element of swords, exists day or night all the time. It is inescapable, just as her responsibilities are inescapable as the Queen of Swords. Right. So when I see the Queen of Swords, that is when I see a person who is self-reliant and incredibly capable. The Queen of Swords rules because she must, because she has to, because there is no other option. It's not necessarily a choice, but I believe that it is a calling that she takes seriously, regardless of how she came by it. So when, you see the Queen of Swords, that's the kind of personality that I think is attached to it. Now, the Queen of Swords does have a history, because like I said before, there is no man that is meant to stand next to the Queen of Swords. The Queen of Swords has been hurt before, whether she did it or someone did it to her or life did it to her. The important thing to note is that she stands alone. She's young enough to take a husband. She chooses not to. She's young enough to empower, she's wise enough to empower other men. She chooses not to. A lot of times when I see the Queen of Swords, I see somebody that goes, no, I don't want to hurt you, and I don't want you to hurt me, so I need you to stand over there. And if I need you, I'll call for you, and if I want to speak to you, I shall, but, just kind of keep your distance. That is energy that I think is very much alive in the Queen of Swords. When you reverse her now, I believe you see people that are looking for connection. I believe you see people that are looking for assistance. I believe you see people that are looking to change the way they present themselves to the rest of the world and do things differently. Well, that's all 4 queens. And I know what you're thinking. That was very informational, but Will, how do we use that in a reading? What is the message? How do we know if these queens are other people, or are our subject or client, or are they just the situation that is presented in a personified form? How do we know? How do we know? How do we know? It's a very confusing thing. The court cards stymie a lot of people. They stymied me for a long time. But that is a whole nother video in of itself. So we're going to call this part 2, and we will cover the practical application of the queens at the table in part 3 of this series. So stick around for that. Thanks very much. We'll see you next time.